Jac Codi Baw. We're going to have a look at the poem very quickly together. I'm going to read the poem and then pick out some things about the poem that I think are worth looking at, particularly about the structure of the poem and the language used. And then after that, in the lesson, I'm going to get you to look closely at the ideas in the poem and how Gillian Clarke expresses the ideas in language. Now, before we start, I'd just like to get you to look at the title of the poem. Now, the poem is called Jac Codi Baw, and this is Welsh, and it's a term that Welsh children use, and it literally means Jack digs the dirt. And it's the name that Welsh children give to JCB trucks and diggers and things like that. You know, those big yellow diggers that dig up huge amounts of earth or knock down buildings. So this poem, you can guess, is going to be written from the perspective of a Welsh woman, and it's going to be about perhaps the use of JCBs. So let's have a look at the poem. Let's have a read through a bit first. They've torn down in the space of time it takes to fill a shopping bag the building that stood beside my car. It was grown over with ragwort, toadflax and buddleia, windows blind with boarding. Other cars had time to drive away. Mine is splattered with the stone's blood, smoky with ghosts. We are used to the slow change that weather brings, the gradual death of a generation. Old bricks crumbling. Inside the car, dust lies, grit in my eyes and my hair. He doesn't care. It's a joke to him, clearing space for the pile drivers, cheerful in his yellow machine, cat-calling, laughing at my grief. But for him too, the handwriting of a city will be erased. I can't laugh. Too much comes down in the depths of warehouses. Brick dust, shards of carnap on slate, blood on our hands. We'll take a quick look through the poem and we'll sort of break it up into parts and think about the ideas in it. Now, it starts off with Gillian Clarke saying, "They've torn down in the space of time it takes to fill a shopping bag the building that stood beside my car." So this is the situation that she finds, and if you can just rule this off, make a line there, so we know that this is the first thing, the first part of the structure of the poem. And what she's talking about is, in the space of time it takes to fill her shopping bag, they've demolished a building, and this would be a sort of a historical building, a building that people are used to seeing in the city where she lives. And then after that she describes what the building was like. It was grown over with ragwort, toadflax and buddleia, windows blind with boarding. So it was a building in disrepair and overgrown with weeds. The windows were all boarded up. So if you can just rule off that part of the poem. So, and you can see that she mentions these weeds that are often quite beautifully. They often quite they flower quite beautifully. But she says that the windows are blind with boarding, so you get some alliteration there, but also this idea that the building is so old it's become blind. It's some personification there, just to make the building seem a bit more human qualities, so that the destruction of the building has far more emotional effect. And she says, other cars had time to drive away. Mine is splattered with the stone's blood, smoky with ghosts. So everyone else, when they saw that the JCBs were going to destroy the building and knock it down, they had time to drive away so that their cars weren't covered with all the stone and the debris of the building. But she was in the shopping centre or the supermarket, and her car was covered. And she says it's not just the fact that the debris has come. She says that it's splattered with the stone's blood, smoky with ghosts. So she uses this image, this metaphor of the stones falling on her car like blood, almost as if this building has been massacred, murdered, and that all the smoke, all the dust that's hanging around and all over her car is almost like the ghost of the building. So some really powerful metaphors there. And then she makes a more general point. She says, we are used to the slow change that weather brings, the gradual death of a generation, old bricks crumbling. Inside the car, dust lies, grit in my eyes, in my hair. So if we just break this up. So the first thing is she makes a very sort of a philosophical point, a more sort of general point about how people are used to sort of things changing, that we're used to gradual change, you know, the weathering of buildings, things slowly change, yeah? So she uses a phrase like, we're used to the slow change, yeah? Or the gradual death of generations, yeah? We don't expect things to suddenly, or generations of people to suddenly die, yeah? We expect things just to crumble away. But this sudden demolition of the building shocks her, yeah? And at the end of the first stanza, first part of the poem, she says, all of this dust is in her car, yeah, in her eyes, in my hair. So it's almost like the destruction of this building has like affected her, you know, like seriously affected her. Not just the fact that literally it's made a mess of her car and it's covered her, but emotionally the destruction of the building, the destruction of her city has affected her. And then in the second part of the poem, she looks at the guy, the man who's driving the JCB, who's actually destroyed the building, and she says, he doesn't care. It's a joke to him clearing space for the pile drivers. He's cheerful in his yellow machine. He's cat-calling. He's laughing at my grief. So the driver sees Gillian Clarke, and she's really angry and upset by what's happened. And he's completely different, you know. He doesn't care, yeah. It's a joke to him, yeah. He's cheerful. He catcalls her, so he's sort of calling abuse at her, you know, just laughing at her. He laughs at her grief. So for her, it's this really powerful word that, you know, like grief, that the city, you know, his buildings, the city, her history is being destroyed. And then she then says, in the final part of the poem, she says, but for him too the handwriting of the city will be erased. I can't laugh, so unlike him she can't laugh. Too much comes down in the depths of warehouses, brick dust, shards of cuneiform slate, blood on our hands. And in this part of the poem's end, she describes the city as the handwriting of the city. Yeah, this is the sort of the profile or the skyline, yeah, of the city. She almost like sees, when you look at a building, the city in its profile, you look across the city, how the buildings rise up into the sky reminds her of a signature. She said, this is erased, she can't laugh, yeah? she says that too much comes down in the deaths of warehouses. Notice how she uses the word deaths of warehouses. She says that it's brick dust, its shards of Carnarvon slate, and obviously Carnarvon is somewhere in Wales that they get slate from for the roofs of the buildings. But she ends the poem by saying that this destruction is blood on our hands. Yeah, so it's almost as if we're sort of responsible. There's some sort of responsibility for the deaths of the city. Responsibility. So it's almost like the destruction of the city, the death of history. It's destroying the past. It's destroying everything we've known, and that if we allow this to happen, we're as responsible as the people who make the decisions to knock down these old buildings.